The crystalline spires of the Lumerian capital gleamed under the triple suns, casting rainbow fragments across the pristine alabaster streets. Within the royal palace, Princess Thalia stood alone on her private balcony, her gaze fixed on the horizon, where the royal spaceport bustled with activity. Today, delegates from Earth would arrive, the newest species to join the Galactic Confederation. Thalia's hand instinctively traced the luminous crystal fragments embedded in her skin, following the patterns that spread across her left side from cheek to fingertips. These formations, a rare genetic anomaly, had marked her as flawed from birth. In Lumerian culture, where physical perfection signified evolutionary superiority, her condition made her an outcast despite her royal lineage. "The Earth delegation approaches, Your Highness," announced Sentinel Vex, her personal guard, and one of the few Lumerians who treated her with genuine respect rather than thinly veiled disgust. "Thank you, Vex," Thalia replied, adjusting her ceremonial robe to better conceal the crystalline patterns across her arm. "I suppose I should prepare to be ignored, as usual." Vex's expression softened. Perhaps these Earthlings will be different. They're rumored to be unconventional in their perspectives. Thalia offered a wan smile, but harbored no illusions. She had endured 27 cycles of being the Shadow Princess, present at royal functions only to satisfy protocol, while her flawless sister, Crown Princess Lyra, received the attention befitting the future Empress of Lumeria. The royal procession to the grand reception hall was a familiar exercise in humiliation. Thalia walked 3 precise steps behind her father, Emperor Solarin, mother Empress Selene, and sister Lyra. The court nobility lined the crystal corridors, bowing deeply to the royal family, eyes carefully avoiding Thalia's approach and rising the moment she passed, as if acknowledging her existence would bring misfortune. The grand reception hall dazzled with light refracted through massive crystal chandeliers. The Lumerian elite gathered in their house formations, adorned in their finest attire of liquid metal and bioluminescent silk. Thalia took her designated position at the periphery of the royal dais, practically hidden in the shadows of a crystal column. The announcement echoed through the hall. Presenting the diplomatic delegation from Earth, led by Ambassador Nathaniel Rhodes. The massive doors parted to reveal a group of humans dressed in formal diplomatic attire. Simple compared to Lumerian standards, yet dignified in their understated elegance. At their head walked a tall man with dark skin and closely cropped silver-streaked hair. His posture radiated confidence without arrogance, his eyes alert yet warm. Emperor Solarin stepped forward. "Ambassador Rhodes, we welcome you and your delegation to Lumeria. May your visit strengthen the bonds between our worlds." The traditional greetings proceeded with painful predictability. Ambassador Rhodes was introduced to Empress Selene and Crown Princess Lyra, each exchange filled with flowery diplomatic language. Then, almost as an afterthought, the Emperor gestured vaguely toward Thalia. "And this is our younger daughter, Princess Thalia." Thalia stepped forward, preparing for the customary flicker of revulsion that even the most disciplined diplomats couldn't fully disguise when noticing her crystalline affliction. She kept her eyes lowered, her afflicted left side angled away. "Princess Thalia," Ambassador Rhodes's voice was rich and resonant. "It is a genuine pleasure to meet you." Something in his tone made Thalia look up. The ambassador had stepped closer, deliberately closer, than protocol dictated. More shocking still, he extended his hand toward her, palm up in what appeared to be an earth greeting gesture. The court fell silent. No one touched the afflicted princess voluntarily. Thalia hesitated, then slowly extended her right hand, her unmarked hand, toward him. Ambassador Rhodes smiled, a subtle shake of his head. "On Earth, we greet with our dominant hand. I believe yours is your left." Gasps echoed through the hall. How did he know? Thalia had been forced since childhood to use her right hand in public, despite her natural left-handedness being another imperfection. Frozen in disbelief, Thalia found herself raising her crystalline embedded left hand. The ambassador clasped it firmly, not flinching at the hard, cool touch of the crystal fragments against his skin. "The light catches beautifully in them," he said quietly, his eyes meeting hers directly, like holding a constellation. The reception continued with tense formality, but Thalia moved through it in a daze. No one had ever referred to her condition as beautiful. Throughout the evening, she noticed Ambassador Rhodes observing the court with shrewd eyes, noting the way others avoided her, the whispered comments behind ornate fans. Later, as musical entertainment began, Thalia retreated to her familiar hiding spot behind a massive crystal formation. To her surprise, Ambassador Rhodes appeared beside her. "Your Highness, I hope I'm not intruding," he said. "Not at all, Ambassador," she replied, instinctively shifting to hide her left side. "Nathaniel, please." He leaned against the crystal, unconcerned with proper protocol. "I've been wondering, do they always treat you as if you're invisible?" The directness of his question startled her. I am not what a Lumerian princess should be." "And what should you be?" "Perfect," she whispered. "Unmarked. Whole." Nathaniel's expression hardened. "Where I come from, perfection is considered highly overrated and entirely unattainable. Your people don't value physical perfection." He laughed softly. "Humans have a long, complicated history with the concept of physical ideals. We've learned, sometimes the hard way, that judging people by physical appearance is not only cruel but foolish. We often find our greatest strengths emerge from our supposed imperfections." Before Thalia could respond, Crown Princess Lyra approached with her entourage. "Ambassador Rhodes, you must join us at the center table. It's inappropriate for someone of your status to be here." Her eyes flicked dismissively toward Thalia. "Thank you, Your Highness, but I'm having a fascinating conversation with Princess Thalia about Earth's cultural perspectives on diversity." His tone remained perfectly cordial, but something in his stance made it clear he had no intention of moving. Lyra's perfect features tightened. "My sister's condition makes her unsuitable for diplomatic discourse. We wouldn't want you forming inaccurate impressions of Lumeria." "On the contrary," Nathaniel replied smoothly, "I find Princess Thalia provides a refreshingly honest perspective. Sometimes the most valuable insights come from those observing from the margins rather than standing at the center." After Lyra departed, visibly displeased, Thalia turned to Nathaniel. "You shouldn't antagonize my sister. She'll be empress someday. All the more reason she should learn that different perspectives have value." He studied Thalia thoughtfully. "How long have they treated you this way?" "Since birth. The crystal formations appeared when I was an infant and continued to grow." Thalia hesitated, then added, "They're connected to my nervous system. The royal physicians believe they're a mutation caused by radiation from the crystal sea where I was conceived." "Do they cause you pain?" "No," she admitted. "Sometimes they resonate with certain energies, but they don't hurt." Over the following days, Nathaniel sought out Thalia's company with a persistence that baffled the court and infuriated the royal family. They'd walk together through the crystal gardens, where he asked endless questions about Lumerian history, politics, and culture, treating her as a valuable informant rather than a shameful secret. "Your people achieve remarkable technological advances," he observed one afternoon. "Yet their social attitudes seem surprisingly rigid." Thalia nodded. "Lumerians believe our evolutionary superiority comes from our adherence to established patterns, both physical and social. Deviation is seen as regression, even when deviation might lead to adaptation and improvement." "Especially then," she replied. "Change is feared more than anything." On the 7th day of the Earth delegation's visit, Thalia received an unprecedented invitation to join a smaller diplomatic dinner. Entering the private dining chamber, she found only Nathaniel and 2 of his advisors present. "Where are the others?" she asked, confused by the absence of Lumerian officials. "I requested a private consultation with you regarding matters of cultural exchange," Nathaniel explained, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Your father seemed quite eager to demonstrate Lumerian hospitality by agreeing." For the first time in her life, Philia laughed freely in the palace. He likely assumed you were being diplomatic about not wanting me present. His mistake, Nathaniel replied. Now tell me more about these crystal formations of yours. I've noticed they seem to glow differently in various environments. Philia hesitated, then slowly removed her outer robe, revealing the full extent of the crystal patterns across her left arm and shoulder. No one has ever asked about them before, not like this. Then everyone has missed something extraordinary, Nathaniel said softly. Because they're not just beautiful, they're reacting to energy fields, aren't they? Philia's breath caught. How did you know? I've been watching. They brighten near certain technologies and dim near others. They're sensitive to something our instruments probably can't detect. For the first time, someone looked at her difference not with disgust, but with genuine fascination. For the first time, Philia wondered if what made her an outcast might actually make her special. Little did she know that this realization would soon change not only her life, but the fate of two worlds. Morning light spilled through the crystal panes of Philia's chambers, casting prismatic patterns across the polished floor. She stood before her reflection, examining the luminous formations along her skin with new eyes. For the first time in her life, she didn't immediately look away in shame. Instead, she watched as the crystals pulsed gently in response to her quickened heartbeat, a phenomenon she had always hidden rather than studied. A soft chime announced Sentinel Vex at her door. Your Highness, the Emperor requests your immediate presence in the Royal Observatory. Philia's stomach tightened. The observatory was where her father conducted his most serious state business, and where she was almost never summoned. Did he say why? No, Princess, but the Earth Ambassador is already there, along with the High Council. The mention of Nathaniel sent a flutter of both relief and apprehension through her. Whatever this meeting concerned, at least one person in the room wouldn't look at her with disdain. The Royal Observatory occupied the highest spire of the palace, its transparent walls and ceiling offering an unobstructed view of Lumeria's 3 suns and twin moons. The massive crystal table at its center displayed a holographic representation of the galaxy, currently zoomed in on a pulsing red anomaly at the edge of Lumerian space. Emperor Solarin stood with his back to the door, his imposing figure silhouetted against the morning sky. Crown Princess Lyra and 5 members of the High Council formed a semicircle around the table. Nathaniel and 2 of his advisors stood slightly apart, their expressions grave. You've finally arrived, the Emperor stated without turning. Perhaps you can explain why the Earth Ambassador insists on your presence for this security briefing. Philia glanced at Nathaniel, who gave her a reassuring nod. I requested no such thing, Father. It seems Ambassador Rhodes believes your condition may be relevant to the matter at hand. The Emperor finally turned, his face a mask of controlled displeasure. Explain yourself, Ambassador. Nathaniel stepped forward. 3 days ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected an anomalous energy signature approaching Lumerian space. Yesterday, your own scientists confirmed its existence. He gestured to the pulsing red formation in the hologram. What you're seeing is what we call a quantum fracture, a tear in the fabric of space-time that releases unpredictable energy bursts. We are aware of the phenomenon, interjected Council Elder Nyx, her ancient face pinched with suspicion. What we fail to understand is why you believe Princess Philia should be included in this discussion. Nathaniel looked directly at Philia. Princess, would you please approach the hologram? Confused but curious, Philia stepped forward. As she neared the table, the crystals embedded in her skin began to glow more intensely, pulsing in an unmistakable rhythm that matched the red anomaly in the display. Gasps echoed around the room. Emperor Solarin's eyes widened. What trickery is this? No trickery, Nathaniel replied calmly. During my time here, I've observed that the princess's crystal formations respond to certain energy fields. They're particularly reactive to quantum frequencies, the same frequencies emitted by this fracture. Philia stared at her glowing arm in wonder and fear. I don't understand. What does this mean? "It means," said a new voice from the doorway, "that you and I have much to discuss, Princess." All heads turned to see an elderly human woman entering the observatory, her white hair pulled back in a severe bun, her weathered face marked with intelligence and determination. She walked with a slight limp, leaning on an ornate cane. "Professor Olivia Winters," Nathaniel introduced her, "Earth's foremost expert on quantum mechanics and dimensional physics." Professor Winters approached Thalia without hesitation, studying the crystal formations with keen interest. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward Thalia's arm. Stunned by the direct approach, Thalia nodded. The professor's fingers traced the air just above the crystals, never quite touching them. "Fascinating," she murmured. "They're not just reacting to the fracture. They are resonating with it, creating a harmonic pattern." She looked up at Thalia. "How long have you had these formations?" "Since birth," Thalia replied. "I was conceived near the crystal sea during the celestial alignment." Professor Winters' eyes lit up. "The crystal sea. That's where traces of previous quantum fractures have been detected in Lumerian historical records, correct? During the alignment, the barrier between dimensions would have been particularly thin." Emperor Solarin stepped forward, his patience clearly wearing thin. "What exactly are you suggesting, Professor?" "I'm suggesting," Winters replied, straightening to her full height despite being dwarfed by the Lumerian ruler, "that your daughter may be the key to understanding, and possibly closing, this quantum fracture before it destabilizes your entire solar system." The room erupted in protests and arguments. Crown Princess Lyra's voice rose above the others. "This is absurd. You expect us to believe that her deformity, her shame, is somehow a gift, that the outcast princess will save us all, her perfect features contorted with scorn. Science doesn't care about your social prejudices, Your Highness," Professor Winters replied coldly. "The quantum signatures in Princess Thalia's crystal formations match those of the approaching fracture with 98.7% correlation. That's not coincidence, it's connection." The debate raged for hours. Council members argued that relying on the afflicted princess would bring shame to Lumeria, while others feared the consequences of ignoring Earth's warnings. Throughout it all, Thalia remained silent, her mind racing with possibilities. For the first time in her life, her difference might have purpose, might have value. Finally, Emperor Solarin raised his hand for silence. "We will permit preliminary research, nothing more. Professor Winters may conduct non-invasive studies of the connection between Princess Thalia and this quantum anomaly. But I will not alarm our people with talk of planetary danger based on unproven theories." As the council members filed out, Nathaniel approached Thalia. "I should have warned you," he said quietly, "but I needed genuine reactions from everyone, including you." "You used me," Thalia replied, a hint of hurt in her voice. "I revealed you," he corrected gently. "There's a difference." Over the following days, Thalia spent hours in a hastily converted laboratory with Professor Winters and Nathaniel. For the first time, her crystal formations were not objects of disgust, but of scientific fascination. Winters developed instruments to measure the resonance patterns, while Nathaniel coordinated communications with Earth scientists. The crystals appeared to function as natural quantum receivers, Winters explained one evening, reviewing holographic data. "They're detecting, and somehow stabilizing, quantum fluctuations around you. That's why they respond differently in various environments." "But what does that mean for the fracture?" Thalia asked. "It means," Nathaniel said, joining them with fresh data, "that you might be able to help us close it." The professor nodded. "The fracture is growing faster than predicted. At current rates, it will reach Lumeria in 17 days. When it does, the quantum disruption could destabilize your planet's core." Thalia felt cold fear grip her heart. "Can it be stopped?" "Theoretically," Winters replied. "If we could generate a counter-resonance pattern at the fracture point, we might be able to seal it. Your crystals naturally produce similar patterns. If we could amplify them, You want to use me as some sort of quantum transmitter, Thalia realized. It would be dangerous, Nathaniel admitted. We'd need to get you close to the fracture in a specially shielded ship. Even then, the quantum exposure would be significant. Before Thalia could respond, the laboratory doors burst open. Imperial guards poured in, led by Crown Princess Lyra. Behind her stood Emperor Solarin, his face thunderous. "Cease this immediately," he commanded. "We have received the High Council's recommendation. This research ends now." Professor Winters stepped forward. "Your Majesty, with all due respect, we're making critical progress." Silence. The Emperor raised his hand. "Our scientists have analyzed your data and determined that your theory is flawed. The quantum fracture poses minimal risk to Lumeria. It will likely dissipate on its own." "That's not what the data shows," Nathaniel protested. "Our scientists disagree," Lyra replied smugly. "And we trust Lumerian science over Earth speculation. Furthermore, we find your fixation on Princess Thalia's condition disturbing. You've given her false hope that her deformity has value, which can only lead to greater disappointment." Thalia felt something snap inside her, years of shame and silence crystallizing into sudden, sharp rage. "My name is Thalia," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Not the afflicted princess, not the deformed one. I have spent my entire life being treated as if my existence is a mistake, as if I should apologize for drawing breath. But these crystals, these things you've taught me to hate, might actually save millions of lives." The Emperor stared at his younger daughter in shock. She had never spoken to him this way. "Father," Thalia continued, her crystal formations glowing brighter with her emotion. "What if they're right? What if the fracture does threaten Lumeria? Would you risk our entire world rather than admit that my difference might have purpose?" "You forget yourself," the Emperor replied coldly. "The decision is made. The Earth delegation will depart tomorrow, and you will return to your proper place." "And what place is that?" Thalia challenged. "The shadows, the margins. Is that where a princess of Lumeria belongs?" "Enough." The Emperor's voice echoed through the laboratory. "Guards, escort Princess Thalia to her chambers. She is confined there until further notice." As the guards approached, Nathaniel stepped between them and Thalia. "Your Majesty, please reconsider. The fracture is growing exponentially. We have the data." "Take your data and leave our world, Ambassador," Lyra cut in. "Your influence has caused enough disruption." That night, locked in her chambers, Thalia paced restlessly. Her crystal formations pulsed with increasing frequency, responding to something beyond her understanding. Through her window, she could see the first of Lumeria's moons taking on an unusual reddish tinge, visible evidence of the quantum fracture's approach. A soft knock at her balcony door startled her. Cautiously approaching, she found Sentinel Vex standing outside. "Vex, how did you—" "There's no time, Your Highness," the loyal guard interrupted. "Ambassador Rhodes and Professor Winters are waiting in the East Garden with a hover transport. They're leaving tonight on their ship and want you to come with them." Thalia hesitated. That would be treason. "Perhaps," Vex acknowledged. "But if their predictions are correct, there may be no Lumeria to commit treason against unless you act." Heart pounding, Thalia made her decision. She grabbed only a small memento of her mother, a crystal pendant, before following Vex through secret passages of the palace and into the quiet gardens beyond. Nathaniel and Professor Winters waited with a small transport vehicle, its engines running silently. "Princess," Nathaniel said with obvious relief, "we were afraid you wouldn't come." "The crystals," Thalia explained, extending her arm, where the formations pulsed with increasing urgency. "They're reacting more strongly by the hour. The fracture is accelerating, isn't it?" Professor Winters nodded grimly. "Our latest calculations show it reaching Lumeria in 6 days, not 17. We need to attempt interception immediately." As they raced toward the spaceport where the Earth ship waited, Philia cast one last glance at the crystal spires of the palace, the only home she had ever known, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. She was leaving everything behind: her family, her heritage, her identity as a Lumerian princess. Yet for the first time in her life, she felt not shame but purpose, not rejection but belonging. Whatever awaited her among the stars, danger, discovery, or even death, she would face it as herself, crystals and all. "Are you certain about this?" Nathaniel asked as they approached the Earth vessel. Philia looked down at the glowing patterns across her skin, no longer hiding them but drawing strength from their light. "All my life, I've been told these crystals make me broken. What if they actually make me exactly what our worlds need right now?" As the ship lifted off, breaking free of Lumeria's atmosphere, Philia felt something else breaking too. The chains of others' expectations, the prison of perfectionism that had confined her spirit for so long. Whatever happened next, she was finally free. And in that freedom, she might just save everything.